Welcome to Alas, Vine and Hitchens. I am Sarah Vine.
And I am Peter Hitchens.
And we are asking, as always, what is the big idea this week? My question is, what is it about shoes? And Peter wants to talk about maps and why they keep going out of date. Join us after the break. Welcome to Alas, Vine and Hitchens. I am Sarah Vine.
And I am Peter Hitchens.
And Peter, I'm going to do that thing where I make you talk about girl things again, because I think it's good for you.
Okay.
And you're very good at it, actually, to be honest. So I want to talk about shoes today because our producer thinks that I'm a shoeaholic because I occasionally buy a pair of shoes, which I've done today. But he's a bit right because I do have a mild shoe obsession. And I think mine comes from the fact that when I have enormous feet, which is tricky for a woman, because when I was growing up in Italy, all the lovely shoes that were available for the girls were not available to me. And I had to spend my school years basically wearing men's shoes because I'm a size 41. And the only shoes you could get in a size 41 were men's shoes.
This reminds me of that old playground jibe, your mother wears army boots.
Yeah, literally. I've got hobbit's feet. So now that I'm a fully grown-up person with my own bank account, I tend to spend quite a lot of my money on shoes just because I can. And because now that people are generally bigger, I can find them in my size. But it is interesting because I do think shoes are a big dividing line between men and women. And I don't think men really understand women's fascination with shoes in the same way that I don't think women really understand men's fascination with football.
I don't have any fascination with football or shoes. So I don't really fit into that dichotomy.
What is your approach to shoes? Are you one of those men who has a sort of...
One of those men who?
So I see shopping for shoes almost as a sport. I don't actually need the shoes because I have plenty of shoes, if you would realize. Yes, you would know if you ever came to my house. But I think it's the hunter-gatherer in me. If I walk past a shop that says sale and it's a shoe shop, I feel compelled to go in and then hunter-gather for the best pair at the best price.
Very strange. I mean, shoes are things you have to wear.
Yes, and you'd say that.
And that's it. I went to many schools where the sort of shoes you had to wear were black leather shoes, which you were supposed to polish. I can still polish a shoe if required.
I'm sure you can.
Though I'd take less trouble than I used to because it really bothers me less and less. And so black leather shoes are what I wear. That's
Any
it.
particular black leather shoe?
Well, ones that I can get my feet into. I have quite, not large, but wide feet and also slightly misshapen because after my motorbike accident, one of my feet was slightly bigger than the other. So buying shoes, if you're me, you buy in the hope that you will eventually beat the shoes you bought in submission. As a wearing-in process.
But
if I were very rich, I would have them made on a last, but it is incredibly expensive.
It is, isn't it?
And so I've never bothered with it.
Did you know that there's a shop just around the corner from here? I don't know if you've ever been to it, called Hornets.
No.
Okay, you might like this shop. Hornets is a second-hand gentleman's wear shop, and it's basically dead man's clothes. And I used to buy a lot of clothes there for my ex-husband.
Well, when I am dead, I'll make sure that my shoes are sent round there so that if there's anybody else with my particularly weird foot arrangements, they can benefit from it. But I don't think there is anybody living or dead who has the same kind of feet as I do. And so I don't think I'm going to do that.
Your shoes, I want a picture of the Peter Hitchens shoe arrangement. Is it just one pair of shoes?
A rack of shoes. No, I have several. They're all the same, and I rotate them, which means they wear out much more slowly than if you don't rotate them. It's a big outlay, but eventually it settles down. If you wear the same shoe, particularly if it's got leather sole, 2 days running, it will wear out much faster.
What happens if you change your outfit and it no longer matches the outfit?
It's a good question, but it's never arisen.
And do you think this 5-year plan of yours related to shoes is maybe a little Soviet?
Yes. Yes, I suppose it might be. But it works better than theirs. Shoes in the Soviet Union when I was there were a rarity. It was one of those things you could not get.
Yeah.
And people would ring each other up if a consignment of shoes came in. They'd go and buy all the shoes they could find, no matter whether they liked them or whether they fitted.
Why was there such a shortage of shoes in the Soviet Union?
There was a shortage of everything because the command economy cannot produce things when people want them. So it produces them when it can. And so out they will come by the thousand. And suddenly one day the shoe shop on Kutuzovsky Prospect would have shoes in it and the queues would form and people would buy all the shoes they could get hold of, and then they would find friends who wanted the particular kinds of shoes which they had bought, and in return, their friends would do something similar for them.
Right.
So that was how it works. You bought everything you get your hands on. You were bound to know people who you could exchange it with or sell it to. And that's what happened. So everything got bought up. But in the end, the shoe shop near where I lived in Moscow was selling china. They didn't have any shoes. They had quite a lot of china and some furniture.
Of course, Italy is shaped like a shoe. Maybe that's where my addiction comes from. A boot, yes.
Boot.
Well, a boot is a for a shoe, isn't it?
Are we getting into semantics now?
No, I know. I am just slightly obsessed with shoes.
You're just trying to steer the subject back to shoes.
To shoes.
Yeah, don't do that.
Well, does Mrs. Hitchens have any shoes?
She does, yes.
Does she have the same approach that you do?
Absolutely not, no.
So
But
does she have
she's a girl.
Okay.
So she wouldn't, would she?
So how is your relationship with Mrs. Hitchens' shoes?
I have no relationship with her
baffled
shoes
by
at
them
all.
ever?
I'm not that kind of person.
Are you?
I don't have relationships with
Does
shoes.
she ask you if you like her shoes occasionally?
Sometimes, but in general, I am so uninterested in clothes. It is almost beyond belief. As I say, I once wrote an essay on this called "The Lifelong Scruff," which I recommend to anybody who listens to this podcast to call up on the web and read. It sums up my attitude to clothes. I don't really care as long as they cover the bits which other people particularly don't want to see, and I don't particularly want to display. I really don't have any other real interest in it at all. I had too many encounters with people who wanted to tell me what to wear.
Right.
And it put me off.
And do you have a view on trainers?
I can see that. I mean, again, I was always brought up to believe that you should wear leather on the feet.
Right. Okay.
And trainers, what the Americans call sneakers, are not that. But I can see why people wear them. I can particularly see why women wear them after that long period of very, very high heels that they were forced to endure.
Yes, I mean, I never really wore high heels because once again, as I said,
Well, you've explained.
I could never get them. Although I did, there is a shop in Chiltern Street which used to cater, it still exists actually, used to cater for, I suppose, I don't know how to put this, the more masculine lady who tended to have larger feet on the whole. And so I used to go shopping there for my special occasion shoes, and they always had them in my size. Or if not, they could be ordered.
Well, it's good that these institutions exist.
But
Imagine being in Burundi or somewhere and having nowhere like that to go.
But I have noticed that more and more people now just do wear trainers.
They do.
I mean,
So, and you can see why it
shoes.
solves a lot of problems. When I did my recent stint in fake prison, I bought some trainers.
Right.
For that
Did you
purpose.
trade them for a packet of cigarettes?
And in the end, I handed them in on arrival at the prison, and I never got them back until I left.
Were you
They
issued with-
gave me some other canvas shoes,
Right.
equally.
What do you think about the fact that there's a sort of thriving second-hand market in trainers? I mean, some trainers are thousands of pounds.
Well, I think that's just insane. But why would anybody want to spend all that money on what I think of as gym shoes?
Plimsolls, as we used to call them.
We call them gym shoes at my school. I think
I know, I
but
used to call
plimsolls
them-
was seen as slightly
What
non-new.
Flimsy. Oh, okay.
No,
I used
non-new
to
as a
call them
word.
Plimsoll.
Plimsolls were the man who put that line on the side of ships, which lets you know when it's sinking. The Plimsoll line, you know the Plimsoll line.
No, I didn't know that.
There's a song about it in HMS Pinafore, the Gildan Sullivan opera.
Can you sing it for us?
No.
Could you recite it for us?
No, I can. There's one line, which is that Plimsoll line ain't where it was,
Okay.
which
very
I
good.
do remember. That was usually a sign the ship was sinking.
Well, I do love the fact that we have got from my shoe addiction to
You
sinking
see how
ships.
hard I was trying to get away from shoes.
I know. It's like I've never seen anyone run so fast in the opposite direction, apart from the time I asked you about the menopause. I mean, they're quite nice, your shoes, but they're a little scruffy.
Well, that's because I don't look after them as well as I used to or ought to or was brought up to.
My father...
It's a betrayal. There's a very good line in that wonderful book, John le Carré book, which one of his best, A Small Town in Germany, about how there's a certain level of shine on a shoe which can only be achieved by people who have servants to clean them for them.
Ah,
And that's one of the reasons why I think they persist at certain levels of society where people can show off the fact that they have got somebody
they
who
have got very, very
cleans
shiny
their shoes for them. You know, the deputy ambassador in Bonn has these fantastically shiny shoes.
Yes, I think that's a bit... I think
It's a really good book, by the way. Again, steering us away from the subject of shoes. It is a really, really good book. It's not a spy novel. It's an envisioned future which didn't quite happen, but it's a beautiful portrayal of what life is like in a British embassy abroad, and also it's a wonderful dive into the history of Germany. Can't recommend it highly enough. It doesn't get much play. It's never been televised or filmed, but it's really, really good.
Have you ever stayed in any British embassies?
Have I ever?
Stayed in any
Good
British
Lord, no.
embassies?
I've been allowed inside them, though.
I stayed in one. I stayed in the Israeli embassy in Tel Aviv once, which was very nice. A very big kitchen, big industrial kitchen. And I've been to the embassy in Rome. That's beautiful.
Actually, because the ambassador in Moscow when I was there was Roderick Braithwaite, who was friendly to journalists and a clever person. We were allowed in quite a lot there. It was then the embassy, one of the most beautiful buildings in Moscow, a sugar merchant's mansion from the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, full of lovely carvings and beautiful painted ceilings and things like that. It's really, really fine building. It's now the ambassador's residence, but it was a privilege to go there. But no, I'm not the kind of person who gets invited to stay at embassies, for goodness sake. I would lower the tone.
But presumably you would just...
My job to lower the tone, and I would do that, so no. Occasional dinner, perhaps, but...
And you could leave your shoes outside, I suppose, and then they could be properly polished.
But when I was very young, you could still do that in hotels.
In hotels,
you could still
yes.
leave the shoes outside, and that they would be polished in the morning.
Yes. I don't think hotels do that anymore, do they?
If they do, they keep it...
And I think it's because the only people who can stay in hotels are the sorts of people who buy very expensive trainers, and you don't really clean trainers.
No, you've reminded me
just
of
spray
the
them.
Hilaire Belloc poem about Godolphin Horn.
Oh, go on.
The terrible snob. Godolphin Horn was nobly born. He held the human race in scorn. He was the most appalling snob, and eventually he ended up as now Godolphin is the boy who blacks the boots at the Savoy.
Well, okay, on that note, I think we shall take a break. When we come back, Peter is going to be talking about, I suspect, one of his very favourite subjects, maps. Do you like maps?
I do like maps,
Yes,
but this
you
isn't
have a
really
look at a man
maps
who
that I'm
likes a
talking
map.
about.
Yes.
It's about the
Cities.
falsification.
Yes.
Falsification of geography.
Serious,
and Indian
proper
history.
conversation, not shoes.
Not shoes, no.
No. Please stay with us. We'll be back after this.
Welcome back to Alas, Vine and Hitchens, in which we discuss all the great problems of the world, such as shoes. I am Peter Hitchens, and she...
Okay, I'm in trouble.
The
It's
woman
Sarah
with the
Vine.
shoes is Sarah Vine. But enough of that.
Yes.
I wanted to talk about the very, very strange habit of changing the names of foreign cities. I was struck only the other day when Donald Trump, veering wildly from position to position, was on the BBC giving an interview. And he suddenly started referring to the capital of Ukraine as Kiev, which I greatly enjoyed because that's what I call it, and I have good reason to do so. But for many years now, since the Russian invasion, which I'm supposed to call for some reason the full-scale Russian invasion, because it cannot be mentioned without that phrase. Anyway, since the full-scale Russian invasion, which I'm also supposed to say completely falsely, by the way, was unprovoked, since then it's been very fashionable to call Kiev Keith.
Yes.
Or something like that.
Kiev.
They can't pronounce it because it jams two identical syllables together. Anyway, you can't call it Kiev anymore, but I do.
Kiev, I think it is.
And there it is. And it's political, the reason for doing this. If you tried to pronounce it as it was pronounced by its inhabitants, you'd get into trouble, just as you would with most foreign cities, particularly the further east you go. And nobody, for instance, in this country, I think, would have, unless they'd had practice, would know how to say Moscow in Russian. Would you?
No, I've no idea how to say Moscow.
People think it's
Roma.
Moskva. It's actually Moskva, and St. Petersburg is St. Petersburg, and all these things. They have these, and we do not to suck up to the Russians.
No.
Call them by these names any more than we call Prague, Praha, or Warsaw, Warszawa, or Milan, or all the rest of it. We don't do it.
No.
And imagine, if you would, this scenario that the French were called in by the Foreign Office in London. The head of the Bureau of Le Monde, the principal French respectable newspaper, was called in by the Foreign Office in London and told, you're to stop referring to London as Londres. You have to call it London. Imagine what the French would do after they stopped laughing. You think, what a ridiculous scenario. Yet, about 20 years ago, the British correspondent of the Times in Peking was called in by the Chinese Foreign Office, and he was instructed that unless his newspaper started calling Peking, Beijing, the Chinese Foreign Office would withdraw cooperation from the Times newspaper. This happened.
But it's the English language.
This happened, and it is one of the reasons why you will find that I am, I think, the last British journalist who refers to Peking as Peking.
As Peking.
Just as I refer to Paris as Paris rather than Paris and all the others that you mentioned. And I still call Bombay, Bombay, and this is for an even more potent reason. I have a friend who comes from that part of India. He's a bit of a liberal, though not that much of a liberal. He's certainly not a very right-wing person. He hates it when British liberal left-wing people call Bombay Mumbai. He says this name was invented by a man called Balthacare, who was a sort of local Nazi, and it's loathed by all the right-thinking people in Bombay, who continue to call it Bombay, but politically correct people in Britain have completely taken to their bosoms the idea of calling it Mumbai, and so they do, and they think as they're doing so that they're being correct when they're not. And it's an absurdity, and it's totally inconsistent. If you want to call Bombay Mumbai, then why don't you call India Bharat, which is its actual name? If you want to call Peking Beijing, why don't you call China? What would you call? What is the name of China in Mandarin?
I have no idea.
Zhongguo. Why don't you call it that? You don't, because you can't be bothered. And when did you last go on holiday in Hrvatska?
I don't know.
It's Croatia. That's what it's called. So all this is the most complete rubbish. And yet we're constantly pressed to do it. Every so often a country changes its name. So Burma becomes Myanmar.
Oh, yes.
And Rangoon becomes Yangon. This has been really weird because it changed its name during a brief period of being run by liberals. And now it's fallen back under the control of a brutal military dictatorship. We've continued to use these politically correct names. We can't even get that straight.
No.
So I say go back to giving. I don't want to go back to the days which, in the Victorian era, when people called Calais Calais and Marseille Marseilles. That's ridiculous. Those have gone out of use in the way nobody calls Daventry Daintree or Coventry Coventry or all these other things. They've gone too. But Paris is Paris, and Peking is Peking, and London Bombay is Bombay. And can we stop doing this foolish messing around with the names of
Who
cities?
started it?
Well, I think the biggest one was changing. Do you know what the biggest university in Peking is still called? Peking University.
Yes,
You've got it. Do you know what the airport code for Peking is? PEK. Yeah. But we have to call it Beijing, and as I say, I have special permission on the Mail on Sunday to call it Peking. Everybody else calls it Beijing. And it's a cultural cringe. It is basically, in that case, it's a cultural cringe to one of the nastiest governments on the face of the earth.
Quite right, too.
Stop doing it.
Is the principle that all these places were given names under the evil British Empire, and therefore they all have to be changed because the evil British Empire must be brought down?
But that's just so what we don't do. You see.
Yeah.
We don't do it with so many places. We don't change it.
Also, I think the other thing to say is I think the old names are so much better. I mean, I think Constantinople is a much better name than Istanbul. And I also think that Leopoldville is a much better name than Kinshasa. They're so much more romantic, these old names.
Well, those do actually have political significance. And Constantinople was before the Ottomans seized it.
And also, I didn't see the point in changing New Amsterdam to New York.
Well, it's because we stole it from the Dutch. So we changed the name. That's what people often do with stolen property. Oh no, that's not your car. You respray it. It's a respray.
And Christiana is definitely better than Oslo.
It's lovely, but it takes longer to say, doesn't it? My favourite name for the city, the big Russian city on the Baltic, is Petrograd. Oh yes. It was when everything that was interesting that ever happened there happened. That's what it was called. But we have to have Sankt Petersburg or perhaps Lenin.
There's some cities though you would rename. I mean, some cities that have just got really rubbish names that actually could do with better names.
Such as?
I don't know. I'm just asking the question. I don't know. Maybe the listeners have some ideas.
Would you rather live in Chemnitz or Karl-Marx-Stadt?
No, and I'm thinking, sort of Bolton. Could we rename Bolton something more interesting?
I think Bolton is quite interesting.
Do you like the name Bolton?
I don't dislike it.
Okay, fine. I mean, I'm just trying to think if there are some. I don't know why I picked Bolton. I just don't particularly like the name Bolton.
Do you have a nasty experience in Bolton?
I don't know. No, I've not had a nasty experience in Bolton. No. I just think there are some names that are. I mean, there are lots of names in Wales that are ridiculous that could probably quite easily be changed.
But if they started calling Sedgefield Blairville or something, I think I'd object.
That would, I think that might be slightly controversial. I don't know why people do these things. Maybe they just got too much money and they're bored.
No, I tell you the story that I told you
about. You have to change everything on the signage, and you have to have a new logo and all of that kind of stuff. The
story that I told you about what happened with Peking to Beijing is absolutely true. It was pressure. They wanted us to use their name,
right?
Because ultimately they're bullies. And it gives you a very, very good warning of what they're like.
Yes.
I don't understand. The shameful thing is we gave in.
And the Kiev thing is confusing because that's just the way it's pronounced, isn't it?
Well, interesting. In the older British orthography before about 1939, it would generally be spelled K-I-E-F-F, Kiev.
Oh, Kiev. Okay.
Yeah, that you find on a lot of old British atlases and references in books. It would be I-E-F-F. rather than K-I-E.
But
It's been Kiev. It's been K. It's not a Russian spelling. It's the English name
okay,
that it had.
yes,
Though I remember right back in the early 90s running into my first really serious Ukrainian nationalists, and they were very, very intent on calling it
this Kiyiv.
Yeah.
Yes, Kiev. I don't know how you pronounce it. It's very confusing.
nor does anybody at the BBC, which is quite funny because
they have to pronounce it all the
differently.
time.
And then
Exactly.
Donald Trump says Kiev on live radio. What?
But isn't it the case that boundaries and country names and all that sort of stuff are always changing? And isn't it just the kind of reflection of who's in charge?
But it's not.
Why not?
The really big ones in the past 40 or 50 years, there's been nothing to do with that. It's been trying to get us. They haven't changed anything. They want to get us to call it.
Do you think they're just cross that the English is the language of the
Some people,
world?
the French have always been cross.
It's very cross about that,
it's, and who can blame them? But very important battles are fought about things which, if you raise them, people say, "Oh, that's so trivial." I said, "Well, if it's so trivial, why did the Chinese go to such lengths to get it done?" The Ukrainian Foreign Ministry have for years been campaigning to get Western Union media to change the name of Kiev. For instance, they really put a lot of oomph into it. On time zones, on Greenwich Mean Time, the French for years and years and years hated it being called Greenwich Mean Time, and it isn't anymore. As a result, after they spent their diplomats spent decades. It's now called UTC.
Yeah, which sounds like an
and it is not. It's not called Greenwich because they hated it being named after Greenwich.
Yeah,
and if they think it's important, then I think we should too.
Yes, you're completely right. UTC now sounds like something that might
You're
be
supposed to disagree with me a bit more.
No, I agree with you on that. But what I also really hate on the BBC is when people say foreign things in foreign accents. I think it's annoying. So when they say Putin in a sort of silly kind of faux Russian accent.
Well, yes, but I mean, if they started calling,
you're English, you're speaking English. You don't have a foreign accent.
The wonderful Bridget Kendall, who was a BBC correspondent in Moscow when I was there, the beautiful Russian speaker.
Yeah.
When she first started going to the BBC, she used her Russian, so she was referring. Do you remember the Soviet Union had a really grim foreign minister called Andrei Gromyko?
I do actually remember that.
Known as Mr. Niet. And she tried pronouncing his name correctly. She called him Mr. Gromyko, which is the correct way of doing it. And she was told off quite rightly by her editor, "You can't do that. It's like calling Sevastopol Sevastopol."
Yes.
Or Moscow, Moskva, or any of these other things.
I mean, it's fine if you're speaking in Russian
it's
to have the correct
pretentious.
accent. But if you're not, if you're speaking in
pretentious.
English, you should just pronounce it in the English way.
And there is a tradition in English also of particularly of politicians and particularly of Winston Churchill, of deliberately mispronouncing foreign words.
Yeah.
You know that he used to call the Gestapo the Gestapo.
I think that's quite funny.
It is quite funny, and he knew it was funny as well when you did it, and the Nazis, because he knew that in every pub in England when that came out over the radio, people would cheer him on because the mispronunciation of foreign words is an English thing.
Yes.
We're saying, "Get lost, Johnny Foreigner."
As is shouting at foreign people in terrible versions of their own.
No, that's awful. You mustn't do that.
That's what
I will not endorse that, but I think there is something slightly amusing about the English attitude of not. Even Latin.
Yeah.
Even Latin is pronounced barbarously in English.
Of course, yes. But my father used to do this thing years ago when we first moved to Italy, and he didn't really speak any Italian. He would speak to Italians in English, but in an Italian accent.
Yeah.
So he would say, "Please, can I have some wine?" Which is the way to the train station.
Wasn't there an Italian pop star who made a film of people dancing around the galleries in Milan, all singing in what appeared to be English, but actually wasn't.
No, exactly.
Nonsense English.
Exactly. So it's very famous. So and it's all nonsense, but it was just done in an Italian accent, so it sounded,
Yeah,
or done in an English accent, but it was absolute nonsense.
But it wasn't English at all. It's brilliant. I love watching it.
It's very funny. It's a very funny thing. Actually, you can look it up on YouTube. I can't remember what he was called, but it was very funny. It pops up occasionally on my Instagram feed, but it is very funny. But it was very funny the way he used to just do that. And we always used to sit around the table in absolute agony at this because it's just, and he would do it in French as well.
No, I think it is terrible. On the other hand, what the complete and utter ignorance of foreign languages among so many people in England is a tragedy.
It's a terrible tragedy.
I was once in a restaurant in Dieppe, having lunch before the ferry, and I was approached, and my French is nothing to write home about. I was approached by a haggard-looking man, his family, who had ordered some awful dish to them of terrifying seafood with waving tentacles by mistake. And I know what the mistake was. I won't tell you what the mistake was because it's so tragic, but they came to me and said, "Can you please explain to the staff that we don't want this?"
What was the mistake? You have to tell us.
Well, it involved the word marmite, I think.
Marmite?
Well, the marmite... Okay, I'll explain. The marmite d'Apois is a...
Yes, I know what the
You know what it is. It's a seafood sort of stew, and it's full of tentacles. It's got nothing to do with marmite,
like something from,
as we know it. But they'd seen on the menu, it was the one familiar word. They thought they'd have that, and the poor things had been served this alien platter, and they were appalled. They didn't know what to do.
Well, so they sort of ordered marmite on toast, and then they sort of got the seventh circle of fish hell.
It was. You could see what had gone through their minds, and it was awful. I felt very sorry for them.
That's very funny. I remember once in a Spanish restaurant, I kept asking where the services were.
Oh, yes.
And they kept saying, "No, it's included." I kept saying,
no,
but please, where are the services? And they kept saying, "No, it's included." And I was asking for the loo, and they wondered.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Anyway,
that's also a bit like being constipado in Spanish as well.
What is constipado?
It means your nose is blocked in Spanish.
My favourite Spanish word, which tells you everything you need to know about the Spanish history towards women, is that the word for pregnant is embarazada.
Yeah.
Which means embarrassed.
Yes, you're saying that.
Anyway, let us know. Let us know if you have any feelings about the renaming of cities.
Or any cities you'd particularly like to rename, like, for instance, Southampton.
Yes. Southampton. Or Bolton.
I speak as a slightly Portsmouth person.
Pompey.
Pompey,
isn't it the football team called Pompey?
Well, the town is Pompey.
Is it? Right. Okay, brilliant. See, I did know that.
City is, I think we must call it now, yeah.
Shall we move on to some emails? We have so many.
I think it must be your turn.
To be honest, I think the thing about this podcast is that it's really just an opportunity for people to talk about you, because you are the star.
Well, of course, that's what people come for.
Oh, yes, they do.
Well, it's what I come for.
Anyway, there's a very long email from a chap called Archie Sykes, and it's quite interesting. And it's very funny,
though. It's not that interesting.
No, but it's very funny because I'd just like to point out there is a spelling mistake in it. And he says, at one point he says, "Whilst I felt Peter provided some very compelling points, especially around Northern Ireland, I felt that his points around Al-Sharaa, although brief, lacked some nuisance." I think he means nuance, because you have never been accused of lacking nuisance.
No, I can always provide nuisance.
Anyway, would you like to address?
Well, not much. I mean, fundamentally, he's trying to make excuses for this outfit, which has recently taken over the Syrian state. And I don't. If he wants to, that's his affair. But the truth is that the Syrian state has swapped one very unpleasant form of government for what will probably in time turn out to be another very unpleasant form of government, and I decline to rejoice. And in the intervening period, millions of people were turned from reasonably contented human beings into refugees, and hundreds of thousands of people were turned from living men, women and children into corpses, and I don't think the prize that's been awarded at the end of it even begins to justify it. And I think that it was, sure, people were discontented with the Syrian regime as well, they might be, but very powerful people outside the country decided that they were going to spend a lot of money and supply a lot of arms to overthrow it. And I don't think that that's the legitimate action for a nation to take. Interestingly, if you're so worried about Middle Eastern brutal dictatorships, Egypt always seems to me to stand out among them as being one of the nastiest, and no efforts at all are ever made to overthrow that or any excuses made for it. I think I'll leave it at that rather than get into a detailed argument about just how much the HTS outfit were affiliated with Al-Qaeda. What they certainly were was they were the kind of people who we would have arrested if we'd found them in Birmingham. And now we're subsidizing them. Now they're in power in Damascus, which seems to me to be, if nothing else, a bit contradictory.
Doesn't Egypt have a very irksome history when it comes to sort of anti-Semitism?
Egypt has an irksome history in many, many ways, but the current government is basically a military dictatorship. It overthrew what was, for all its many faults, because it was the Muslim Brotherhood, an democratically elected government. And then when people rose up in protest and exercised their freedom to protest on the streets of Cairo, they were gunned down in very large numbers. This fact is not actually very widely known in Britain. It wasn't much covered because everyone on the BBC and everyone else had got so enthusiastic about the Tahrir Square events and the Arab Spring that they never followed through. I remember going there when the military had stepped back, and it looked as if the Muslim Brotherhood were going to take over, and writing things. So when they do take over, people who are really keen on democracy are going to, on this occasion, say, actually, no, thank you, we don't want democracy because it's produced a Muslim Brotherhood government, which we don't want, and that's what happened. When it came, the overthrow of it was particularly brutal, and you cannot make any kind of claim to have a moral objection to the Assad regime and to believe it should have been overthrown because it was horrible, and at the same time tolerate the Egyptian one or the other, not both. Me, I say practically other people's countries are not our business, and we're not theirs.
We have an email here about pop music, which was...
Well, I think, may I ask you
like
to introduce that?
Okay. I mean, are you sure you wouldn't like to, just because then you can find out more about pop music, which I know is
I know
very interesting.
more than I want to about pop music.
Dear all. An answer to the question.
Forced to know about it.
An answer to the question from the podcast notes, why can't we make decent rock stars anymore, could be that rock and pop music are now culturally insignificant, when I think Peter would argue that they always have been. This was impressed on me by my ex-hi-fi dealer friend a few years ago, who urged me to accept that what existed when we were young, we are now in our 60s, no longer exists. There is no more Top of the Pops, no weekly music magazines like the NME and Melody Maker, etc. Many of the music venues I visited are now gone, and many of the old musicians have sadly passed on. Another factor is that computers have destroyed music, as they have reduced the value of it to almost nothing. The adoption of digital, a format in my opinion, but really a fact, an approximation of natural sound. The adoption of digital has also reduced live concerts. Now a digital mixing desk processes the sound before putting it through the speakers instead of hearing the musician's live output. I walked out of the last concert I attended in 2016 because it had become painful to listen to a digitised live performance. People of any age snigger when I say I enjoy listening to records and buying old original singles and LPs. One memorable comment I heard was, records are for old people. Well, I guess being old, they may be right. Thanks.
What would be wrong with that?
Nothing at all, I don't think.
Saying something is for old people is a compliment. But he does have a point, and I think one of the things about the great musical revolution of really the early to mid-60s was that it was a revolution, that things did change utterly. The whole idea of what people liked to listen to and what came over the airwaves was completely transformed. And I think almost everything since then has been derivative of that. People have been trying to copy the originals of that period and failing because it couldn't be copied because it doesn't have the freshness to whatever else you might say. And I won't say it now about the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. They were something entirely new.
Yes, and they were also genuinely musicians. I mean, they could actually play their instruments.
Yeah,
a lot of pop stars now couldn't play an instrument if their life depended on it.
That may well be true, but it's not my point. This is something completely different. I used to have this theory that the 60s had happened because they put something in the water. In fact, it was because they put something in the air. I think it did genuinely change the mood of the Western world in many, many ways for the worse. Particularly, there's a song called "Come Together," which you will have heard. Which has been described by one writer about the Beatles as being absolutely pivotal in changing the way people thought about everything from serious, rational, historically and otherwise literate into drug-dominated pop.
Yeah, came all about.
It was an absolutely pivotal moment of 1969, I think it was, when that came out, and it symbolises a complete change in the way in which people behaved and thought for the worse. And this is brought about by it. And having brought that about, it's created a world in which genuinely new things can't arise. It's sterilised itself.
Because people are just not doing the due diligence that requires change?
There's nothing to rebel against anymore.
There's nothing to rebel against.
There's nothing to rebel. The rebellion is in charge.
Right.
All those guys in bandoliers and submachine guns, they're in charge now. And the guys with the guitars have taken over from the guys with violins, and there it is. It's gone.
Well, I don't like that song. I'll be honest, and I don't actually really like the Beatles.
It doesn't matter whether you like it or not. It's you cannot live in a world in which you have heard it as many times as you have to hear it. Without it having some effect on you.
If I could eliminate one pop song from the entire pop music canon, it would be "Imagine" by John Lennon.
Yes, it would be fun eliminating
annoying
that. A very
song
large
ever written by anybody.
bonfire.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So, what would you like to get rid of?
Oh, I'm not really a get rid of. I enjoy fantasizing, but I do dream of having an architectural crimes tribunal after which a very large number of buildings would be dynamited. But
that would be fun.
while their architects were strapped to posts and made to watch. But
Okay.
that's
Okay.
that's as far as I will go. You can't unsing songs. They're there.
Well, I wish you could unsing.
That's the problem with them. You can't.
Dreadful dirge.
You can, however, blow up horrible buildings.
Absolute dreadful dirge. Dear Sarah and Peter, congratulations on founding and continuing to produce such a wonderful podcast. It is entertaining and interesting in good measure, and I look forward to listening to it every Thursday morning on my drive. Sorry, Peter, it's a bit far to cycle. To singing training. Sarah, if I may, I would like to pull you up on something you said last week in your chat about live music. Ever since Coldplay first had an enormous worldwide hit with their 2002 single, The Scientist, it seems to have been commonly accepted that they only make depressing and dull music. A brief listen to their first 4 albums in full especially will quickly prove this wrong. Anyway, this is from Kit Bradshaw. He then provides...
May I just say before you go on,
yes.
Please don't anybody apologise to me for driving. I know people have to drive. Even I sometimes drive. Generally to attend the funerals of friends who
I think I might
insist on being buried in remote country churchyards. It's the only way of getting there. Our society is designed around the car. People have to. What I want is to redesign it so they don't. Okay. So don't apologise to me.
Thank you.
I understand. E-bikes is another matter. There is no forgiveness in me for e-bike riders at all.
I came to work today on an e-bike, just so you know.
You what?
I came to work today on a Lime bike.
Well, that's absolutely shocking.
I did
apologise to the nation. It's a terrible thing to do.
It was fine. I mean, I didn't.
Fine for you, maybe.
There was
a holy terror for everybody in your path.
Actually, I was very well behaved, and
that's what they all say.
I was on the cycle lanes.
Your Honour.
I only shouted.
No, you shouldn't be in a cycle lane. You're a motor vehicle.
Sorry. See, how's the bus?
And I won't do it again.
No, I will do it again.
Yes, exactly. So you're not.
Of course, I will. Anyway, Kit, going back to Kit's lovely email. He recommends a list of songs by Coldplay that are not boring, and they are Shiver, Politic, God Put a Smile Upon Your Face, White Shadows, Talk, The Hardest Part, Yes, Viva La Vida, Adventure of a Lifetime, Charlie Brown, and A Sky Full of Stars. And I thank Kit for this, but so of all of those, I know Viva La Vida and I know A Sky Full of Stars, and I really have to say I don't like either of them, but I will go away and listen to the others, I promise. By the way, my son loves Coldplay. He's always trying to make me listen to it too, so I could have a bonding moment. Would you like to read the next one? Why are you looking at me? Peter's literally looking at me as though he wants to kill me.
No, that's not my I want to kill you look. It's just actually this is so bad. I'd rather be talking about shoes. Look, let's talk about films. A couple I left off my list last week were, of course, Great Expectations, which is quite possibly the greatest film ever made in the English language. Is if anything, even better than the book. Mm. And also the original, the 1959 film of Dunkirk, not the stupid, moronic, empty, plotless rubbish which was made about Dunkirk a few years ago, but the original. It's really, really good because, apart from anything else, it captures what life and opinions and the general mood of England were like at the time that it happened. And it portrays the retreat in a way which is completely credible and in which you identify with the people undergoing it. It's the best thing about Dunkirk that I've come across, apart from a book that used to hang around our house when I was small, called Return via Dunkirk by an artillery man who wrote under the pseudonym of Gunbuster. Amazing collection of short passages about what it was actually like being in a defeated army, hurrying for the coast, and then getting there and not necessarily being able to get out. Very, very good. But the film is good, and I would like to recommend that. Others will come to me. But those two I failed to mention. Great Expectations is a terrific film.
Well, we have an email from Emma, and she says, my film recommendation would be Manchester by the Sea. It's a fairly recent film, 2016, and it won 2 Oscars, including Best Actor for Casey Affleck. Although it's a very sad movie, there are still some humorous elements in it. And then she also suggests All Quiet on the Western Front, but I feel you may have already seen that. That is a great film.
Hard going, I found. Well, there's a new version which I thought was poor, but the original version, which is a work of genius for its time, but is quite hard going now.
And then Emma says that her favourite films, which you know Peter will not see in capital letters, are Back to the Future.
Oh, I like Back to the Future.
And Rocky.
I did see it when it first came out.
It's very good.
So she's wrong. I know. I saw Back to the Future about 6 months ago for the first time in many years. It's very clever.
Oh, it's a really fun film. It's really
And
fun.
sometimes it's so funny that you don't know what to do.
It's very clever. And then Anthony via Spotify, we love Anthony via Spotify, says he would recommend the movie Warfare, which was released earlier this year. It's a true account of Navy SEALs engaging in a firefight with Al-Qaeda insurgents in the Iraqi city of Ramadi. So there you go. That's a good one to watch.
I've been to Ramadi.
Well, I think that's all we have time for. Thank you for listening to Alas, Fine and Hitchens. We will be back next week. Please don't forget to check out this week's reading list, watch list, and share the books, TV and films you think we might want to read or watch. For that or anything else, you can contact us at alas@mailonline.co.uk. Leave a comment on Spotify or send us a voice note. WhatsApp on 07796 657 512, and please start your message with the word alas.